I heard the scream before I saw her. At first, I thought it was a child playing, but then I recognized the pitch. High, sharp Lena's. I dropped the grocery bag and sprinted across the cul-de-sac, heart pounding, as my worst fear unfolded in slow motion. There she was, my daughter, her wheelchair half tipped over the edge of the sidewalk, one of the wheels spinning uselessly in the air. And holding her by the arm, yanking her across the grass like she was trash blowing through a yard, was Karen. HOA Karen. Her voice was shrill and twisted, yelling something about rules and trespassing, but all I could hear was my daughter crying, her voice cracking with every plea. Please stop, that hurts. Please. The neighbors watched, some from their porches, some through barely open blinds. No one moved. No one stopped her. And I froze for half a second, not because I was scared, but because I didn't understand. I didn't understand how a grown woman could look at a 12-year-old girl, a girl with braces on her legs and a feeding tube tucked into her side, and drag her like she didn't matter. Lena wasn't even on her lawn. She was barely touching the corner, just sitting under the tree we always passed on our daily walk, the only place that gave her shade. That's all it took for Karen to snap. And as I rushed forward, yelling for her to let go, she turned to me and hissed, "Your daughter's a menace. She doesn't belong here. None of you do." My hands trembled, not out of fear but rage. I pulled Lena into my arms, shielding her from this woman, from this neighborhood, from this madness. But Karen just stood there, straightening her name badge, smug in her power. That's when I realized this wasn't just about grass. It wasn't about rules. It was about control. And she was ready to destroy a child to get it. What happened next changed everything. Not just for me, not just for Lena, but for everyone on this street. People think they understand what it's like raising a child with special needs, but they don't. They see the wheelchair, they see the ramps and the modified van, and they smile politely, maybe offer a few words like, "You're so strong," but they don't know. They don't see the hospital nights, the missed birthdays, the way your world shrinks to doctor visits and medication timers. And they definitely don't see the way some people, like Karen, look at your child like they're a problem. My name is Daniel Reyes, and my daughter Lena is the strongest person I've ever met. Born at just 24 weeks, she wasn't supposed to live. But she did. And not just live. She laughs, she fights, she paints like she's seen colors I can't imagine. So, when we moved into the Oak Ridge Lakes community last spring, I thought we were finally giving her what she deserved. Peace, safety, a home she could grow into. We knew it was an HOA neighborhood. We knew there'd be rules. And we followed every single one. We mowed the lawn, paid our dues, kept our trash bins hidden. But what we didn't know was that some rules weren't written down. Like the one that says you don't sit under her tree. Or the one that says people like us aren't welcome unless we stay invisible. The first few weeks were quiet, a few weird glances, one or two reminder notes from the HOA. But then the letters came, then the fines, and then Karen. I didn't speak up right away. I kept thinking, let's not cause trouble. But trouble already knew our name. And the day she put her hands on Lena, that's when I knew this wasn't just my story anymore. It was hers. It started small like most storms do. Just a wind shift here, a dark cloud there, nothing you'd call a problem. But looking back, I should have known from the moment Karen Blake knocked on my door with that clipboard in her hand. It was a Wednesday. Lena and I had just gotten back from her physical therapy, and she was exhausted but happy. We had this ritual. She'd draw one picture after every session like a memory snapshot. That day it was a tree, tall, wide branches, thick shade. That one across the street, she told me, it looks like it's protecting the sidewalk. She said that with such peace in her voice, I smiled the whole way into the house. 15 minutes later, Karen was at our door. She didn't even say hello, just cleared her throat, pointed to the drawing taped to the front window, and said, "Your daughter seems to be getting comfortable on the HOA green space." I blinked. "You mean the tree?" She nodded. "The grass around it is HOA managed. Children aren't supposed to linger there. It attracts pests and disturbs the ecosystem. There are rules, Mr. Reyes. I tried to stay calm. I said Lena was just sitting, not eating, not littering, not damaging anything. Just sitting. Karen tilted her head and gave me a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Rules apply to everyone, even the differently abled. She whispered it like it was a disease, then turned and left. I stood there for a few seconds, heart pounding, not with fear, but confusion. Who says that? Who sees a little girl with leg braces under a tree and gets angry? Still, I didn't say anything. I told myself maybe she's just protective of the neighborhood. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But the next day, there was a note on our doorstep. A fine for $75. Violation, unauthorized use of common area. And next to the official HOA header was Karen's signature. That weekend, Mr. Dalton, our neighbor 2 houses down, stopped by. He was kind, ex-Marine, widower, always wore the same baseball cap with a faded Semper Fi. He handed me a 6-pack and said, "Word of advice, Karen runs this block like a private military. You play nice, or she makes you regret it." He didn't say it to scare me, more like warn me. But I still didn't think it was serious. Then came incident number 2. Lena was sitting outside in the driveway while I mowed the lawn. I looked up and saw Karen standing across the street, arms crossed, taking pictures of her. Not of me, of her, my 12-year-old daughter. I walked over and asked what the hell she was doing. She said, "Just documenting. If the HOA has to get legal, it helps to have evidence." Evidence of what? That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about grass. It was about us. That week, I got 2 more fines. One for unapproved wheelchair ramp angle. One for visual obstruction. Lena's therapy chair, folded and tucked behind the porch, apparently broke some uniformity rule. Karen was behind them all. Always smiling. Always polite. But with venom under every word. Sarah, a younger woman down the block, reached out quietly. She whispered to me in the grocery store aisle, "You're not the first family she's targeted, but you might be the first she's not scared of." I wanted to believe it was all just one bitter woman's obsession, that it would die down, that if we kept following the rules, it would all blow over. But then one afternoon, I found Lena crying on the porch. She didn't want to tell me what happened, just sat there holding her sketchbook, hands shaking. I opened it. The page was torn, ripped down the middle. The words, "You don't belong here," were scrawled in red marker across the tree she had drawn. My daughter didn't speak for the rest of the night. And that's when I stopped hoping things would calm down. Because it wasn't just a storm anymore. It was war. And Karen had just declared it on a child. You always hope people have limits, that at some point, even the worst ones will stop themselves and think, this is going too far. But Karen Blake didn't have a line. Or maybe she just enjoyed stepping over it. It had only been 2 months since we moved into Oak Ridge Lakes, but by now, Lena's name had been mentioned in 4 separate HOA reports. None of them accurate. All of them signed by Karen. And every report had the same undertone, that Lena was disruptive, that she made residents uncomfortable, that she was a nuisance. A 12-year-old girl in a wheelchair with a sketchbook in her lap. The scariest part? Some neighbors started believing it. One afternoon, Lena and I were at the end of the driveway, watching the clouds roll in. She loved storms. Said the thunder made her feel like the world was talking back. That day, a golf cart pulled up. HOA issued beige slow. Karen sat behind the wheel like a sheriff in a Western movie. She didn't greet us. She just parked on the edge of our driveway and said, "You've been warned twice. A third infraction, and you'll be fined and reported to the compliance committee. We take loitering seriously." I looked at her, blinking through the absurdity. She's not loitering. She lives here. Karen clicked her pen. "Then I suggest you keep her inside. People pay good money to live in this community, and they expect a certain appearance." I stood up. I could feel the blood rushing to my face. "You're talking about a child. My child. A child who's done nothing wrong." Karen smiled like it was a game. "Just doing my job, Mr. Reyes. You should be grateful we haven't escalated things legally." I wanted to say a lot of things, but Lena tugged on my sleeve. Quietly, gently. Can we go inside, Dad? She whispered. I don't like when she talks. We did, but something inside me cracked. The next morning, I found our garbage bins knocked over, contents scattered, smearing down the sidewalk. A pink slip fluttered on top. Violation, unsightly property conditions, $50 fine. Signed, K. Blake. I went door to door asking neighbors if they'd seen anything. Most claimed they didn't. Some avoided eye contact. But Mr. Dalton, bless him, called me into his garage. He didn't say anything, just pressed a USB drive into my palm. Checked the timestamp. Cameras above my porch light. What I saw on that footage made my stomach turn. It was grainy, but clear enough. Karen herself, at 2:12 a.m., in her slippers and robe, pushing my trash bin over with her foot, and walking away like nothing happened. She staged the whole thing. I showed the footage at the next HOA meeting. Karen, of course, denied everything. Said it was edited, taken out of context, and obviously part of a campaign to discredit her service. The board shrugged. Literally shrugged. One of them even said, well, it's her word against yours. Maybe don't leave your trash out so long. I looked around the room, wondering how this was real life. How a woman could gaslight a neighborhood into silence. How a disabled child could be publicly harassed and still be blamed. That weekend, Sarah from down the street invited us over for tea. Lena played with her dog in the backyard while we sat under a patio umbrella. You're not crazy, Sarah said. She did this to another family last year. They had a son with autism. She called him a liability. They moved out after 3 months. I swallowed hard. Why does no one stop her? Because she knows how to play nice in public. She donates to community events. She hosts fundraisers. She bakes cookies. She makes everyone feel like she's the hero of the HOA and makes the families she targets look like the villains. Then she added something that chilled me. She told people Lena fakes her disability for sympathy. The final straw came a week later. Lena had a bad morning. Her muscle spasms were worse than usual, and her feeding tube was sore. I let her skip school, and we took a quiet walk, same path, same tree, same patch of shade she loved. She asked if she could rest under the tree. I checked the area. No Karen in sight. I agreed. I turned my back for 2 minutes to take a phone call from her physical therapist, and when I turned back, Karen was dragging Lena across the grass by the arm. Lena's face was frozen, not in pain, but in disbelief. She wasn't even crying, just stunned. Get off my grass. Karen shrieked, spit flying from her lips. I warned you people. My phone dropped from my hand. I screamed her name, Karen, and sprinted across the street. My voice echoed off the perfect picket fences and manicured lawns. Neighbors peeked out. None came to help. I grabbed Lena, pulled her free from Karen's grip. Her arm had red marks. Her wheelchair had tipped on its side. Karen didn't even flinch. She was trespassing. You people don't listen. Maybe next time she'll learn. I don't remember what I said back. I just remember Lena sobbing into my chest. I remember the burning behind my eyes. And I remember the look on Karen's face, calm, victorious, like she'd finally won. But she didn't know one thing. She had just turned a quiet father into a storm. And what she did that day wouldn't be buried under HOA reports or neighborhood rumors. No, it would be remembered, and it would be recorded. Because from that day forward, I wasn't just protecting my daughter. I was preparing to expose everything. The day Karen laid hands on my daughter wasn't the worst day of my life. It was the most defining. Because it was the day I realized something terrifying. If I hadn't been there, if I had been even 30 seconds later, what would have happened? We had just returned from Lena's therapist. It was her first full week back at school after her latest round of surgeries, and she'd been trying so hard to keep up. I was so proud of her, not because she was strong, but because she never wanted pity. She always said, Dad, I don't want to be seen as broken. I just want to be seen. She loved that tree, that stupid old tree on the HOA green space. It wasn't even on Karen's property, not even close. But to Karen, it symbolized control, order, and maybe in her warped mind, power. I'd let Lena rest under the tree that afternoon, like we'd done dozens of times before. I parked her wheelchair right under the lowest branch. She opened her sketchbook and began drawing the curve of the roots, the birds above, the way the sunlight made the grass shimmer. I turned away to take a call from her school's aide, just to check in. I didn't even walk more than 10 steps. That's when I heard it. A thud, then a cry. Lena's voice. Weak, panicked. I dropped the phone and spun around. And there it was. Karen crouched over my daughter, gripping her by the arm, pulling her across the grass like she was a bag of garbage. Lena's wheelchair was tipped on its side, her sketchbook thrown a few feet away, pages fluttering like fallen leaves. Her arms flailed, but she couldn't resist. She couldn't fight back. Not in her condition. You don't belong here. Karen screeched, her voice ragged with fury. I've had enough of this circus on my block. I screamed her name, Karen, but it didn't even faze her. I sprinted across the street. My legs didn't feel like mine. The world blurred around me. The only focus was Lena, her terrified face, her mouth open but no sound coming out, just tears. I grabbed her first, shielded her body with mine, and then I turned to face the woman who had done this. Karen was panting, her face red, her hair wind-blown and wild, like she had lost all sense of who she was. She was trespassing, she spat. She was on my grass. It's not even your damn grass. I roared. She flinched, maybe because no one had ever yelled back. Or maybe because she realized, for once, she'd gone too far. Neighbors were watching now. Mr. Dalton stood at his fence, arms crossed, jaw tight. Sarah had her phone in hand, recording. A few others peeked through blinds. But still, no one came closer. Lena was sobbing into my shoulder. Her tiny hands clutched my shirt, shaking. Dad, she whimpered. She hurt my arm. I checked, red marks, raw and angry. Her brace was twisted. One of the straps had broken. I looked back at Karen. You're going to pay for this, I said, my voice like ice. You put your hands on a child. Karen straightened her HOA badge like it still meant something. I have witnesses. She was loitering, disturbing the peace, drawing graffiti. She was sketching a tree. I held up the notebook. Karen's eyes locked on the page, now stained with a muddy boot print. My fists clenched. She turned, trying to regain her composure. You people are always looking for a fight. Maybe you should find a neighborhood more suited to your lifestyle. That word again, you people. Not just about disability. Not just about class. It was about us. I called the police. Karen stayed calm the whole time. Smiling. Lying. Said Lena had fallen out of her chair, and she was only trying to help. Claimed I was escalating the situation. I handed the officer the footage from Mr. Dalton's porch camera. Everything, the assault, the dragging, the screaming, was captured. Karen's smile cracked when she saw the officer watching it. Still no arrest. Not yet. Just a statement taken. An incident report filed. I asked the officer, if this were your child, what would you do? He didn't answer. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She kept asking me if it was her fault. Maybe if I hadn't sat there. Maybe if I smiled at her more. Maybe if I drew a different tree. I held her until she drifted off, her hand still clutching her crumpled sketchbook. That's when I knew this couldn't be ignored. This wasn't just about HOA drama. This was abuse. It was about people in power using policies as weapons and nobody standing up to them. Not anymore. I opened my laptop and created a folder. Operation Exposure, Karen Blake. Every email, every fine, every false report, every neighbor's statement, every video, every photo, all of it, because I wasn't just going to protect my daughter anymore. I was going to make sure everyone saw what this neighborhood allowed, and by the time I was done, Karen wouldn't be able to hide behind any badge again. I thought filing the police report would bring some kind of justice. That the video, the bruises on Lena's arm, the witness recordings, all of it would force action. But justice doesn't always arrive with flashing lights. Sometimes it limps, and sometimes it never shows up at all. The officer took our statement with the right words. Unacceptable, we'll investigate, we're escalating to the HOA board, but his eyes never met mine. He scribbled notes and handed me a pink slip with a case number that looked more like a receipt than protection. Karen? She stayed in her house. Not arrested, not warned, not even questioned at the scene. She walked back inside like she had just returned from the grocery store. Lena wouldn't leave the house for days. She barely spoke. She wouldn't touch her sketchbook, wouldn't sit in her chair without trembling. She'd flinch when I stepped too quickly toward her. That crushed me more than anything. At night, I'd hear her whispering in her sleep, "Don't pull me. I'll move. I promise." I called the HOA. Left 3 voicemails. The board president finally called back, Mr. Allenby, a man who hadn't spoken to us once in 2 months, but now had plenty to say. "Mr. Reyes, the board takes these allegations seriously," he said. I asked if they'd seen the video. He paused. "We are reviewing all available materials. But please understand, HOA policy is not the same as legal liability." "So, what does that mean?" I asked. He sighed. "It means Karen's position as community compliance officer is an elected one. We cannot remove her without a formal complaint, a hearing, and board majority approval, even after she assaulted a child." I snapped. "She disputes that, and several residents have raised concerns about your family's disruptive energy." That broke me. I hung up mid-sentence. Sarah came by later that evening. She brought a tray of cookies, the same kind Karen usually distributed to the board during HOA meetings. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at the irony. "I showed your video to a few neighbors," she said. "Most were shocked, but some didn't want to get involved. Said you were blowing things out of proportion." Blowing it out of proportion? My daughter had bruises. Her wheelchair was damaged. She was dragged across a public space like she was nothing. But suddenly it was about us causing drama? Sarah hesitated before speaking again. "Karen told them you edited the footage. That Lena threw something at her, and it was self-defense." "Lena? Throwing something? She can barely lift her school bag without help." "She's spinning the story," Sarah said, "and the HOA's letting her do it." Of course they were. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA. "Due to multiple complaints and formal community concern, you are being issued a final courtesy warning for behavior deemed combative, disruptive, and noncompliant with community standards." They attach copies of the fines. "Unattended medical equipment visible from sidewalk. Disturbance of common space. Verbally aggressive behavior toward a board member." Each one signed again by K. Blake. No mention of the video, no mention of the attack. Just a warning, for us. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. Lena saw the envelope on the counter and asked, "Did we do something wrong again?" I didn't know how to answer that. Because no, we hadn't. But in this neighborhood, doing nothing was never good enough. We considered moving. I looked at listings 2 towns over. But then Lena said something that stopped me cold. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, hugging her stuffed animal, and asked quietly, "Dad, if we move, does that mean Karen won?" That hit like a punch to the chest. I'd spent my whole life teaching her that strength doesn't mean fighting every battle, it means knowing which ones matter. And this one? This mattered. Not just for us, but for the next family that moved in. The next child who wouldn't be able to fight back. The next dad who didn't have a neighbor with a camera. We stayed. And I got to work. I filed an official legal complaint with the city. I compiled a timeline. I contacted other families, the ones Sarah mentioned, and one by one, they started opening up. One family, the Johnsons, had a daughter with autism. Karen claimed she was a hazard for screaming during meltdowns. They left after 8 weeks. Another woman, retired and wheelchair-bound, had been fined for parking her mobility scooter in a visible location. A pattern was forming, a pattern nobody had ever documented in one place because Karen kept them isolated, ashamed, and silent. Not anymore. I launched a website, hoadeniedaccess.org. I uploaded videos, documents, statements, audio recordings. I redacted names where needed. I let people speak anonymously, but the stories flooded in, and people noticed. Local news noticed. A reporter emailed me. Would you be willing to go on record? I asked Lena first. She looked at me for a long moment, then said something I'll never forget. Tell them. Tell them everything. I'm not afraid of her anymore. Change didn't arrive with a bang. It came like whispers in the dark. 2 days after Lena gave me permission to speak publicly, I got an email. No subject, no signature, just one line. Check your mailbox before 6 a.m. tomorrow. You didn't hear this from me. I was up before the sun, watching the street through the window. At 5:43 a.m., a figure in a gray hoodie walked to our mailbox, dropped a small manila envelope inside, and vanished between the hedges. Inside the envelope were printed HOA meeting transcripts, including a private board session that took place the day after Karen assaulted Lena. It wasn't public record, but someone had recorded it. The notes included this line, written in Karen's handwriting. Frame it as a misunderstanding, mention the girl was moving erratically. Say she startled me. Board will support it. Another voice, likely the treasurer, had scribbled underneath. Too risky. Too many cameras. Reyes won't let it slide. I held the papers in my shaking hands and realized we weren't alone. Someone inside was watching, and they were done staying silent. Over the next week, more things began happening, small, quiet acts of rebellion. Sarah, who had always been kind, left a potted plant on our porch with a handwritten card. For Lena, because every tree deserves to grow without fear. She didn't sign it, but we knew. Mr. Dalton dropped off a flash drive with more camera footage, this time showing Karen knocking over our bins again 2 nights earlier wearing the same robe. He didn't say a word, just tipped his hat and walked away. Then came Margaret, a retired school teacher and the oldest resident on the block. We'd never spoken before. She came over with a cane and trembling hands and said, "That woman humiliated my granddaughter for wearing braces to the pool 3 years ago." I didn't say anything. I should have. I'm sorry, but I'm with you now. I hugged her. She sobbed in my arms. Every time I thought we were alone, someone whispered, "I believe you." It wasn't loud. It wasn't fast, but it was spreading. HOA denied access. The website was getting comments. Anonymous at first, but then real names. People who didn't even live in Oak Ridge Lakes started sharing their stories. One woman from Arizona said, "I was fined $100 for planting a tomato in my front yard. My autistic son ate it and the HOA said he was damaging property." Another man wrote, "They said my daughter's wheelchair ramp was an eyesore. Told us to paint it to match the house. She's 6. The pattern wasn't just Karen. It was everywhere. But Lena's story, our story, lit the match. And then something incredible happened. Channel 8 News reached out. They wanted to film a segment. Not just a story, a full interview. They said it would run during the 6 p.m. community spotlight. I looked at Lena again. "You still sure?" She nodded, this time with a smile. "Let's tell them what she did. But also tell them I'm okay. I want them to know I didn't stay scared." The spark had been lit. The silence was breaking. And Karen? She had no idea that her quiet war had just turned into a public reckoning. The room was packed. Folding chairs lined every wall, and neighbors who'd never shown up to an HOA meeting before now stood shoulder to shoulder, whispering, tense. For once, people weren't here to talk about pool hours or paint swatches. They were here for Karen Blake. The HOA board sat at their usual long folding table. 5 members, all stiff-backed and tight-lipped, except Karen, who sat dead center, her name tag gleaming, lips pursed in a practiced smile. She hadn't said a word to us since the incident, but her eyes scanned the room like a queen surveying her kingdom. I stood in the back with Lena beside me, holding her sketchbook in her lap, a brand new one, with a navy cover. The old one was in a drawer now. Torn pages, dirty footprints, but not forgotten. The HOA president tapped the mic. "We'll begin with item 1 on the agenda, community concerns." I raised my hand. Karen's smile twitched, but she didn't flinch. The president hesitated. "Mr. Reyes, go ahead." I stepped forward, plugged in a USB drive, and looked at the crowd. Most of you know me as the guy Karen fined for grass height or wheelchair placement. I said. A few chuckles rippled through the room. I continued, but what many of you don't know is what's really been happening. To us. And to others. Quietly. For years. I clicked play. The projector screen lit up. Footage rolled. Karen dragging Lena. Karen knocking over our bins. Karen whispering into her phone. Staring out the window. Gasps echoed. Lena's voice played next, the Channel 8 interview. Calm, composed. I was just sitting under a tree. I like trees. They make me feel safe. But that day, she made me feel like I wasn't allowed to exist. The room fell silent. Then came the HOA meeting transcripts. Karen's notes. Frame it as a misunderstanding. Too many cameras. He's escalating it. Karen stood. That's enough, she snapped. This is edited. He's twisting this. But the room wasn't with her anymore. Even her board members looked away. I stepped closer to the mic. This isn't just about my daughter. This is about every person Karen has targeted. The Johnsons, the Frasers, the disabled, the different, the ones who couldn't fight back. I turned toward the board. You have two choices. Remove her, or let the public and the press decide what kind of community this really is. A beat passed. Then Margaret, the elderly neighbor who had once stayed silent, stood up. I vote to remove Karen Blake from the board, she said, voice shaking. But not because of politics. Because I saw what she did with my own eyes. Mr. Dalton stood next. Same. Then Sarah. Then 3 more hands. Then a wave. One by one, people who had never spoken out before, who had once looked the other way, finally stood. Karen shouted over them, this is a witch hunt. This is harassment. You're all falling for this man's sob story. But no one sat back down. No one defended her. The president leaned into the mic, effective immediately. Karen Blake is suspended pending a full investigation. Her access to compliance documentation is revoked. Karen froze. And for the first time since I met her, she looked small. Lena squeezed my hand. Did we win? She whispered. I didn't answer right away, because it wasn't about winning anymore. It was about being heard. And we finally were. Karen never returned to the board. Within a week of the meeting, she resigned for personal reasons. No apology, no statement, just a final HOA email thanking her for her years of service and wishing her well. But everyone knew the truth. Her reign of silent fear was over. And our street, once polished and perfect on the outside but rotting on the inside, finally began to breathe. The first thing that changed? The silence. Neighbors who used to look away now waved from their porches. Some even stopped by to chat. One man, Mr. Patel, brought over a handmade birdhouse for Lena and asked if she'd like to paint it for the community garden. The second change? The tree. The old oak, once a symbol of tension, was turned into a community art space. With the board's approval, Lena painted a mural at its base, a bright landscape with the words, safe, seen, strong. She signed it with a little sketch of her wheelchair. And for the first time in months, she smiled without fear. The biggest change, though, was in Lena. She started drawing again, started sitting outside again, started living again. Her story was shared across the country, news sites, advocacy groups, even a short feature on a national talk show. Messages poured in from other families saying, we thought we were alone. Thank you for showing us we're not. And one day, while watching herself on screen, Lena turned to me and said, I'm not just the girl in the chair anymore, am I? No, baby, I said, you're the girl who moved mountains. And as for me, I stopped staying silent too. I now speak at local council meetings. I volunteer with families navigating HOA discrimination. And I've learned that real change doesn't come from yelling louder, it comes from telling the truth again and again until someone finally hears you. Because in the end, Karen didn't just try to pull my daughter across the grass. She tried to pull her into the shadows. But instead, Lena rose. And now, every child like her knows they belong. If you've watched this far, thank you. Because this story isn't just ours. It belongs to every family who's been silenced, every child told they don't belong, every neighbor too afraid to speak. This wasn't just about grass. It wasn't about noise violations. It was about power and what happens when the wrong people hold it. If a little girl in a wheelchair can be dragged across a lawn in broad daylight and the community still blames her, then we have work to do. Work in our neighborhoods, in our HOA meetings, in our voices. Speech balloon if something like this has happened to you or someone you love. Share your story in the comments. You never know who might be listening and who might need it. Loudspeaker share this video. Post it on your Facebook. Send it to that one neighbor who thinks their power is untouchable. Let the world know the silence is breaking. Bell subscribe to this channel. HOA denied access here. We expose what others hide. We speak for the unheard. We stand with those left outside the picket fence. This is more than a channel. It's a movement. And we're just getting started. Because when communities fail, we build better ones. Together.